Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful. All praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you and your loved ones, Ya Rabbil Alameen. And thank you for joining us again here on Thursday. Let's talk about it, where we try to stay relevant and discuss important topics and have guests who contribute positively to the conversation, inshallah. Quarantine has impacted us as individuals as well as families, family relationships, what has become of us as individuals. Most therapists have reported 65% increase in their business as a result of more people wanting to be seen by a therapist, be it because of issues related to depression, be it because of issues related to anxiety. Some families are really doing well, and some families are struggling. Relationships are improving, some relationships are not improving. And that is going to be the topic here this evening. And we have got a good friend of mine, a clinical social worker, Sister Iman Saymeh, whom I have had the pleasure of knowing for the past 20 years. Iman was an educator, she was a teacher, and then for some time she also worked as a school principal. And she's shifted away from the education, going to another type of education. And now she is in the mental health field as a clinical social worker. Iman, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you, Sheikh, for the invitation.
Jazakallah khair. It's good to have you on board, Iman. So before we get into the topic of relationships, the shift from being an educator to mental health. Tell us, how did that happen, and what do you see as a result?
Very good. In the education field, as a teacher and then as a principal, I would see kids who usually get in trouble most of the time and end up being in the principal's office would fall under three specific categories. So it's either they would have mental illnesses that are not diagnosed, not talked about, or there will be family disputes, family problems with the marriage that is not looked at, or parenting style that it's not a match with the kids, and it ends up all showing up in the classroom beyond the ability of the administrators and the teachers to handle. So I felt like I wanted to serve the children and the community and the parents differently. So I decided to shift from the education field into the mental health field.
Nice. So do me a favor, just take us back again to these three observations that you have made. Beginning with the last one, you said that parenting style that did not work for the child. What did you mean by this?
So sometimes we have children that are raised in a cultural-based home, or maybe faith-based, upbringings. And there will be some sort of disconnection within the two generations, or the two, the society that the parents were raised in, and the society and the culture that the kids are raised in. And sometimes that gap, that's where the entire style is not a match with the kids, where the parents will start building barriers and walls rather than bridges and understanding where the kids are coming from.
Nice. And how did that show up in the classroom? Like, how would you tell that it was this issue and not other issues?
So that would show up in the classroom in the way that the kids would interact with other kids, their demeanors, the way they speak, the way that they come off, the way that they perhaps sometimes treat a male teacher or a female teacher, the way that they respect authority or don't respect authority. Different ways that you could detect these things. And then when you sit with the parents, you see where the disconnection is. You would see, and sometimes both parents, the mom and the dad, are not on the same page. So that also creates confusion within the kids.
And Iman, I'm very sure that we are not suggesting to our viewers that the culture is bad. What we're saying is,
absolutely
and I like
not.
There is a mismatch.
Yeah.
Right? And I know that when we teach our parenting classes, there is always this emphasis that the job of a parent is to protect and prepare their children to survive and thrive in the society that they are living in. And I think that the key important part in this definition is that we are preparing our kids to succeed and to protect them so that they survive and thrive in the society that they are living in.
Very true.
And I think that's where the disconnection that you speak about takes place.
That is true, but it takes self-awareness on the parents' part to understand their limitations and to understand where their understanding of how to do things or how to raise kids could be limited in the culture that the kids are raised in. That's why it's very important to reach out for resources, reach out for other parents, and really build good connections and relationships with other parents who are also raising kids within the same culture, same background. So they will build a new understanding.
And then for what, build new understanding as far as what? As far as the culture is concerned, or as far as raising the children is concerned?
Both, as far as understanding what they're bringing to the table that's causing the barrier, or what they get to shift within themselves for the parenting style to be more effective.
Nice. Okay, so that was one, the mismatch between the culture and the child. And then the other one, you said that undiagnosed or untreated mental illness that the child is experiencing or going through. And again, what did you mean by that?
So sometimes some children would have some sort of maybe learning disability or some sort of mental illness due to hereditary factors or situational factors. And perhaps the parents are not aware, they lack knowledge, or they lack the understanding of its importance. And perhaps they are not looking into it. They don't want the kid to be labeled. They don't want the stigma. They don't know how to take the first step. So it leaves the kid a bit frustrated because they're limited with their skills and what they can do in the classroom setting.
Iman, sometimes when we hear these things, you're wondering, well, why is it that the teacher that's picking up on this and not the parent?
The teacher sometimes can pick up on this and the counselor of the school can be involved, but really the teacher is not equipped. The training of the teacher is not into mental health and diagnosis and that route. But sometimes some teachers can suggest or can direct or give resources to the parents, but it's up to the parents to follow through. Sometimes when a certain feedback is given to the parents over and over and over, it's worth taking that to the pediatrician to look into it as well. So sometimes it's the following through of the parents.
Nice. Okay, so you were doing this in the capacity of a principal and as a teacher, and then you decided that you wanted to shift into mental health.
Mm-hmm.
What are you seeing in mental health? One question that I get frequently once people find out that I'm a clinician, usually they want to know, it's like, so what are you seeing? What is happening with our community? What are the issues? So what are you seeing? What are the issues that you are coming across?
What I'm really seeing, where I find it the root of a lot of problems, the couples are coming into the commitment of marriage not knowing who they are and choosing people for whatever reason. They're in love, for cultural reasons. Oh, it's a good match. Oh, it's a good family, but they truly don't know what they're looking for in a spouse. And they don't know who they are coming into a marriage. And they're unaware of the effect of their childhood on them as adults. So they come in with all sorts of baggage already, not knowing the effect of it on the commitment. Now, when couples don't look at that, and then they bring kids in the picture, all of that gets channeled into their parenting style, and the bickering and the frustration ends up happening, and the kids will end up suffering. So what I'm seeing, there's a lot of frustration overall. I see, but I see a great deal of awareness that's happening, and I see a great deal of willingness and flexibility to listen differently. I think I'm seeing kids speaking up more about mental health, and they're speaking up more about the enmeshment of their household.
Iman, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but I really just
Learning
want to make
of
sure that,
religious.
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt again, but I just want to make sure
No, no,
that
go ahead.
when you're making these points, we want to make sure that we let our viewers know that the purpose of these talks is really informative. And we're hoping that please do not psychoanalyze
Yeah,
yourself or psychoanalyze your spouse. I know it's very tempting to do so. And you may
that's
hear
right.
something that really resonates with you and you
Yeah,
say, uh-huh, see, that's exactly what the problem is. You didn't know who you were before you married me, or I didn't know myself before I married you. So we just want to make sure that we leave it at this is the purpose of this is somebody sharing with us their observation, and it should not really be used as ammunition against somebody in the um in the family. And also for our
absolutely not.
viewers, if you have a question, please do use the chat box on YouTube, and inshallah we'll look into that question. Alrighty, and then you were talking about what you were seeing as well, as far as people willing to listen, you said, or people willing to younger generations are more open to mental health. What does that mean? This is like really good news.
I'm seeing more invitations from MSAs at college campuses to talk about mental health. There is a mental health week now in every campus here, I'm noticing in SoCal, which is great. And they invite different speakers. I think the more we are aware and the more we can articulate what it is, the more we're able to look at things differently. And I think that's what's happening, which it's bringing clarity, healing, understanding, still in the infancy stage, but it's happening.
Okay. All right. And you were taking us back into the whole
What are you
family.
seeing in the community, Shaykh Yasir? What are you seeing in the community when you switched?
When I mean, the problems remain to be the same, and that is just people having challenges. But something that I really, really like to remind people of, and I'm very sure you have something to say about this, Iman, and that is, I think that in our pursuit of having that perfect family, that perfect marriage, I like to remind people that your family is good not because it's problem free. There is no family that does not have problems. I think that a good
Uh-huh.
family is a family
Yep.
that has problem. However, they are able and willing to acknowledge the problems, and they want to make sure that they have the humility and the tools to address their problems and use the problems as means of growth rather than the problems pulling them down. So you are not a bad family if you have problems. It's just that how is
No,
your family reacting to those
everybody
problems?
has it differently.
Okay. Yeah,
Absolutely.
please
And
say
you
more
said
about
a word over and over. So you said the word, we all strive to be perfect. There is no perfect. There is no perfect family, perfect child, perfect spouse, perfect house. There is improvement, enhancement. There is, I bring a new understanding. I bring a new light onto things. It's just awareness. Anytime you hear about mental health and how to improve your marriage and how to improve yourself, like Sheikh Yasser said, it's not an opportunity to say, I'm bad. Oh, that's why. Oh, I'm broken. You get to be aware and you get to just do better. That's the purpose of these talks.
nice. Okay, so we're going back again to what it is that we are observing. Um, like I said,
Okay.
in the family dynamics. What about you just mentioned that the openness that younger people have in order to talk about and open up in mental health versus my guess is you're saying that older generation maybe they're not as open as the younger ones. Is this what you were referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. So their parents perhaps maybe not as open as they are to acknowledge and to articulate and to name the feelings and to talk about what's happening. But at the youth level and college students level, they're able to have those conversations and they're able to look at the effect of certain aspect of their upbringing. I usually see counselors and therapists on Instagram. They push this idea that I find it damaging and alarming. If you don't like your mom, cut her off. If you don't like your dad, these are the boundaries. And we need to understand that as Muslims, Islam does not allow us to be abused or degraded or disrespected, but everybody has rights in our lives, and we get to put boundaries, but also fulfill the rights, right? And with the youth, they get a bit confused with that piece. Well, this therapist said we can cut off my, but you still have rights, and your dad has rights, and you get to work through these difficult relationships. My worry is we get into this understanding of cutting people off, and we never really face hard conversations or hard feelings or hard relationships or hard personalities, and we will never thrive through that. So I'm every time I get invited to speak to the youth, I get excited because I get to a little bit enhance that idea and that understanding of that piece, and to acknowledge and validate. Yes, some parents do a great job. Some parents, they don't. And some parents, we are disappointed with certain things, but we get to work with what we have, and we get to enhance on the strength we walked away from our childhood.
And what you just said is precisely why I tell people it is important that you be selective in the type of therapist that you see.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, if you're licensed, it just meant that you have gone through, a rigorous program and you ended up taking an exam and passing the exam.
So,
However, I think that there is really this important element of cultural competency. You want to be able to speak to people because, see, this individual may be living here in the West, but they also have their own cultural background, they have their family culture. So when you go somewhere and they push on that, and I'm just talking about cultural values here, I'm not talking about moral values. When people push on cultural values that do not necessarily exist in your household, such as individualism, which is like the biggest thing here in Western culture, especially American culture. The idea of it's okay to cut off your parents. But this person is a Muslim. This person comes from a cultural background that really speaks highly of family, and it's a collectivistic system. So that's why I say, if you can say more about the importance of, the counselor that you pick in order to be seen by or for you to send your kids to.
Very good. So people have this understanding if somebody's a therapist or a mental health, it will be an automatic match. That is not true. You almost have to shop for a therapist. You have to have your match. If you need somebody that speaks your language, look for that. If you need somebody who understands your cultural background, look for that. Sometimes what I'm seeing that some of our community members would rather go somewhere where somebody who's not a Muslim, not an Arab, not Desi, not from any background, so they will be able to talk to them freely. But I say that you will hit a plateau, you will hit a limitation with that, because they're not going to have all the pieces that you need to heal. That, like you said, the cultural competency is very important for that to be part of the healing journey. The spiritual piece is very important for that person to come home to themselves and heal and really strengthen their spiritual being. So picking a therapist is a very important and vital piece for your ultimate healing journey.
One thing that I also sometimes we overlook in addressing is how do people go on about picking a therapist? People would just call me up and they say, we have got an issue. Can you please talk to us? And I would say, look, you can consult with me, but you need to find a local therapist because of legal jurisdictions and also ethical jurisdictions. I am unable to practice in every state because that would just be illegal as well as unethical. So people say, well, what should I be looking for? Like when I look for a therapist, what do people do? Google therapist near me. And, I just look at them and I just pick one. And with that, what do I look for when I'm looking for a therapist?
We're here in SoCal. We are grateful for a group of therapists who put together a directory. We have a national directory and we have a local directory, and it's accessible to everyone. If we can also share the link here. Some therapists are listed on psychology.com as well. In my humble opinion, when you're looking for a therapist, you need to identify what you're looking for. You need to know what you're going to the therapist for. You're not going to make friends. This person is not going to be your friend. This person is going to be your guidance, your source of healing, but you need to do the work. You need to be committed. You need to know it's going to cost money, or maybe your insurance will cover it. You need to know all these things. You can't just go and be oblivious to everything that comes with seeing a therapist. It is a commitment. And sometimes it's not going to be comfortable. And sometimes it's going to make you feel lighter and you're going to feel a sense of freedom. Every session is different. But you get to bring all of you, your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual being, and really look at the good, bad, and the ugly. In order for you to change something within you, you need to be able to look at the light and the dark within you. You need to look, as I said earlier, if that person speaks a certain language, if they have a familiarity with a certain culture. You need to, if you have anger issues, you need to see if that therapist specializes in that. If you are looking for a certain therapy, like you're dealing with certain issues, the therapist usually lists their specialty under their profile. So really look for these things. And I always encourage people to book a free, like 10 or 15 minutes, if the therapist offers it, either telehealth or on the phone conversation, and just see if there's a match. See if there is some sort of chemistry, if that's the person that you feel comfortable with. Maybe after 2 sessions, you don't feel comfortable, but that's what I would say.
Yeah, yeah, and like we said, the whole notion of cultural competency and language abilities. See, like what you just said, somebody is Arab, Daisy, and if you did not know what do these two terms mean, Arab or Daisy, and this is the lingo that you grew up with. Just as an example, I can see you in your hijab, and I'm not sure if you're doing this on your own. Who was there a male figure in your life that's making you do this? It's the parent, husband, brother who's making you do this. So there is so much that does not need explanation, that does not
Sure.
take away from the time, the energy, and the effort. And the relationship is just, look, I know what this is. This is a hijab, and it just the flow of the relationship becomes very, very easy. We've got some questions also coming from our viewers, speaking about, I think people are picking up on the marriage part that you just mentioned
Okay.
earlier. Question here says, if you marry at the age of 30 or older, you are more mature to solve marriage conflicts. Would the guest support early marriages, and why? Would you suggest um, early marriage? And I'm sorry, but as you're looking into this, there is also, I guess, an assumption that is made here. If you marry at the age of 30,
Yeah,
supposedly you are more mature and you have better ability um, to solve marital conflicts.
that's what I was thinking about the assumption of 30. Some people gain life skills. Maybe that's what that person is referring to as they get older, and they're able to look at problems differently. But I don't think that's a rule. I think that's an opinion, with all due respect, because some people might be much younger and have that maturity and ability, and they had been around people who taught them different skills. As Muslims, I think early marriages are healthy. Marriage is healthy. How early? Uh, that's not what I'm discussing here. But the idea of getting married in your 20s, 19, 20, 21, yes, maybe the age is young, but there is no rule when do you get married. People, when they meet the right person, that they think the right person at that time, and they want to get married, they should get married. What do you think, Sheikh?
So statistically speaking, in the US, if both parties, teens have the highest rates of divorce.
Yeah.
And if people are getting married prior to them being 25, the likelihood of also them getting divorced are very high. However, remember that these are the national statistics. Within the Muslim community, though, and we're talking about the practicing Muslim community. I fully agree with you as far as I believe that it's very healthy for people to get married at an earlier age. How early is that? Is it really depends on the maturity of the individual. You may have your 20-year-old versus your 25-year-old. And we're just talking about, look, they're mature, they're able to
Yeah.
handle responsibility. Do older people have better ways of solving marital conflicts? I'm not sure. Sometimes, people say that, look, the older you get, the more set on your ways you become. The younger you are, supposedly, the more
You're more
flexibility
flexible.
that you would show. But I am absolutely in favor of people getting married at a younger age. Actually, one of the sessions that we will be having here is exploring the hookup culture, which is really the norm nowadays in what is going on, and how our kids are really impacted by this. But there is a follow-up question to that. The question says that, what are your suggestions for youth when looking for future spouse? What are they supposed to be looking for?
I believe that when you marry somebody, you marry their family. It's very important to also look at where that person, where does that person come from? How was that person raised? Spend time with their family, spend time, introducing the family to one another, and get to know that person in different light, when they're alone, when they're with you, when they're with their family. I mean, the different aspect of the personality comes out differently, right? So it's very important to know where that person coming from and how they were raised, and the influence, the people who are around them, their mom, their dad, their siblings, their choice of friends.
Nice. Yeah, we have a course called Before You Say I Do, and it's a long. I should not really call it a long list, but there are guidelines. This thing is, you find people putting more effort in looking into the car that they need to buy than the person that they are marrying. They read up on the reviews, they read up, they compare it. It's just like a lot of effort, and rightly so. I mean, rightly so. You're spending your money here, so you want to make sure that you get the best thing out there. And I'm not suggesting that marrying a spouse or finding a spouse is like finding a car. But what I'm suggesting is that you are putting the effort in getting to know what this product is all about, because you're going to make that financial commitment. Similarly, if you're looking for a spouse, I would say that you would also be putting that commitment and that effort in knowing enough about that individual and about that person. One of our viewers wants to say salam to you, to me, and to all the viewers out there. They're from Massachusetts.
MashaAllah.
Wa alaikum salam wa
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah. So just moving on with the, I'll get back to the questions again. We've got a lively discussion going on here. Just going back again, Iman, to what you said that you were seeing as far as the factors or the reasons in the conflict, and you did mention the cultural gap between the children and their
parents.
And many times as a therapist, I literally find myself being either a translator or an ambassador between these two cultures.
Something is missing.
There is. Somebody's speaking Greek in the process there. And as eloquent as their Greek is, nobody understands what they're saying. And honestly speaking, every time I get these issues, I am like, my heart is giggling, because I can just say, oh, okay, so that's what they mean. But just the way that it came out, or this is what they understood, but this is really what was meant. The cultural gap, is there really a way of bridging this gap?
The cultural gap, the problem with that gap, it's laced with religion. So the kids end up thinking that's how their religion is. That's the teachings of their religion. And we get to separate the two, because that will end up making Islam all about rules and limited. One thing that I see, how do you bridge between the two, is awareness, is really realizing where the two are overlapping and where culture is only cultural practice and the practice of Islam is completely different. and to distinguish between the two and to realize that you need to do things differently. But I want to say this, Shaykh Yasir, you know, growing up, I grew up in an Arab conservative Muslim home. So practicing Islam was never a lack. My parents both practiced it. We were around a lot of, you know, different Muslims, different communities. My parents were very much involved in different Muslim communities. My dad ran halaqat in the home, you know, circle of study circles and in the different mosques. And I grew up in different areas, a little bit in Houston, a little bit in Kuwait, a little bit in Charlotte. And I really, truly, and this is not to boost Sheikh Yasir's ego, I really did not start listening differently until I met you here in Orange County. Some parents raise their kids with fear of them leaving Islam. And in the process, they completely miss out on connecting with them, befriending them, loving them, because they think that's how they're going to love them. And the kid starts rebelling and pushing away. And before you know it, they want to take off the hijab. They want to leave Islam. I'm atheist. I'm agnostic. I'm this, I'm that. And the parents are freaking out. Mm. Parents need to understand, A, the importance of their dua and the importance of their place within the kids' lives, and the kids will get to a place where they want to discover themselves. They want to know who they are. They want to push all the envelopes. And for the parents to really truly be that container for them to experiment. If the kids don't have that within their upbringing, where they make mistakes and then they come back and then they question things, they get to do that when they're adults. If you look at where does the idea of midlife crisis comes from, it's an accumulation of emotions and feelings that haven't been processed, trauma that happened, and we get to a point where just things fall apart because we haven't really stopped and looked at things. The spiritual hearts is in Allah's hands. The parents get to pray for Allah to ignite the light in their hearts and to understand that even if they're planting the seed, my parents didn't lack in doing their job. They did their dua, they did the salah, they did everything. But my heart turned because I heard it differently. We get to put them on the righteous path, our kids. We get to do our part, but just to know their final guidance or the way they're going to listen differently might not come from us, might come from somebody completely different. But we would have planted the seed, but along the way, don't lose your kids. Don't build barriers. Don't limit emotions and intimacy with them. They will find it everywhere else. They will find it with other people. They will find it into, you know, all kind of addictions because they have that void. So that piece, I see it often in our community where the parents are raising them out of, oh, I'm fearing that they're going to leave Islam. They're going to end up leaving Islam if this is how you are going to raise them. And to really take a few steps back and say, okay, what do I get to do differently as parents? What do I need to improve in the way I'm connecting to Allah, to myself, and to the kids? Allah does not give us kids so we can lose ourselves, right? So I'm sure you could speak more on that.
You know, very, very, very well said. I mean, it was all music to my ears. You know, the whole point of not undermining the dua and just being,
yeah.
I always believe that Islam makes intellectual sense. And I think living here, we also need to make a cultural sense out of it. Meaning that I need to speak it in a language that is actually understood by the cultural norms in this area. And by the way, I don't need to compromise my Islam when I am attempting to make a cultural sense out of it. You don't need to really compromise any part of your deen. And one verse that comes to mind is from Surah Ibrahim, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِن رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ لِيُبَيِّنَ لَهُمْ. And we have not sent a messenger, but that messenger spoke the language of the people so that they may explain things to them. And the idea of speaking the language of the people is not just the alphabets of the language, but also being aware of the cultural language, the language that is understood by the locals. Yeah, there is a way of speaking Islam in certain parts of the world that would absolutely not make sense here. It's not that Islam does not make sense. It is just that the vehicle that we are using to convey Islam will not really, this would not, the road is
Match.
not paved for these types of vehicles. And I think that as people who chose to live here, part of what we need to do is be able to bridge that gap in order that we are able to deliver Islam in a way that makes cultural sense, not only intellectual sense in the process. But I love the idea of, just don't undermine your dua. Do not lose yourself. Do not bring up your children with the fear that they're going to leave Islam. I think importantly also what you said is about, raising children is a process and you're just putting them on that right path. And it may not be you, but it was actually the initial steps that you took, and somehow
صحيح.
it was later on facilitated for them to do that. Iman, have you? I know that in our training, religion was not really a
Focused
big
or
part of what was. In fact, I have no idea why, but as clinicians, we are not supposed to get into religion with our clients. Good news is that most of our clients reach out to us because we're Muslims. So the
that's
idea
right.
of bringing religion is really, part of why people come to see us. And you seem very comfortable bringing up religion in, this. Did you find any resistance in that?
As you said, in our trainings and our program, it wasn't much infused. It wasn't really taught or thought about as a coping skill or a place to go to implement in the healing journey. We talked about spiritual healing or spiritual therapy. As a Muslim therapist, as a therapist in general, I don't believe I am for everybody. I am for those who Allah wants to guide through me. They could be Muslim or non-Muslim. I think we all need to shine differently in our niche. I am not a cookie cutter of everybody else. Everybody bring their own light. And I'm a true believer that there's an amount of sadness and depression and anxiety in this world that cannot be healed without a relationship with the divine, with a higher being. If my clients want to bring up the concept of God, which most of them, it just happened to be that most of them want to, and they do understand the importance of that, then we talk about it. But I don't lead my therapy session with talking about religion and God and the teachings of that, but I am very comfortable in who I am, and I am very comfortable if it's brought up. I think it's very important to be comfortable with who you are as a therapist, instead of saying, oh, no, I'm not going to talk about this. So that's why I'm saying I'm not for everybody. I am from those who will be guided through my guidance.
Nice, and I'm hoping that as our viewers are watching, I think we're also taking hints as far as what do I look for in a therapist. So, I have parents who would want to bring their children to talk to me, and they say, Sheikh, we want you to please emphasize Islam. And then the kid comes in and they say, look, I really don't want to talk about Islam whatsoever. So, like you said, we would, at this point, the relationship is more important
Yes.
than the content. I've got to establish the relationship first, and then after that, we can, do what we believe is right to guide and support the client. One thing I remember I read so nicely about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that they spoke about his gentle nature, and what in the definition of gentleness, they say that gentle people have like 8 different qualities. But one of them was their ability to connect before they correct. That is like what gentle souls are capable of doing. Connection before correction.
Very
and I think what
important for
happens is that
therapy.
many times we want to correct, not having built any connection with that. And as they say, whenever you have rules that were not preceded by any kind of emotional investment, people are most likely going to rebel against these rules. And that's such a great thing for parents to remember. And that is connection before correction is absolutely vital. And I think that's like, I think what makes our job so nice is that we're just constantly paying attention to this. I need to connect with this individual, and I need to. What do therapists do to connect? Like, what do you do in order to connect with your clients?
Well, the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sessions, I get to listen. I get to really, truly listen. There is an art in listening, or not art, there's a blessing when you listen. Sometimes you listen to what's not spoken or not what's said. And then from that, you can formulate questions. I think you can build depth in understanding where this person's coming from. You can't imagine you're going to sit there and do therapy and help them and guide them and all of that in the first session. You need to understand the story that just walked through your door. Everybody comes with a story, and you really need to be aware of your own biases coming into their story, because it's not about you. You get to be out of the way. You get to hold the container, and you cannot bring any assumptions. You really don't know until they talk. You really have no idea, even if they are your cousins or sister or whatever. I mean, you cannot have therapy sessions for your family and friends, but even if you know that person, even if somebody from the community, you still don't know. So you get to listen with open heart, no judgment, no biases. You don't get to bring your stuff in the session. And from that, you build connections, because if you listen, you're able to recall. You're able to say, you know, I this is what I heard. This is what I heard you saying. Where is this coming from? So they will feel like, wow, this person is really paying attention. And you're really genuinely are doing it. You're not putting on an act, but you really get to connect with the heart that is saying things, maybe sometimes for the first time. So it's really listening.
I don't know. I hope I am not repeating myself here to our viewers, but one of my like favorite client ever, just going off of what you said about the art of listening. I remember in one of the classes, I think it was clinical interviewing, and the professor said, the best session that you would have as a clinician is when you spoke so very little and the client did most of the talking. Like, that's how you know your session was great. So
and with that point, Sheikh, I just wanted to say one thing. Sorry to cut you off. Most people get frustrated with therapy because they think, oh, the therapist was just listening. But that in itself is healing. Because sometimes when you speak, you by yourself are processing things that has been inside of you. So therapy is not you're paying money for somebody just to listen to you. They're listening to you. You are actually listening to yourself in the presence of somebody else. Go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay. And hopefully, inshallah, so as therapists, we're not just there doing nothing. We're letting you know by different, hopefully techniques and skills that they have that they're listening. So in any case, so this professor tells us that, that's like the best therapy. And I've been waiting for that best therapy session that I would have. And one day we were invited at a conference, and I think, so in between sessions, they said they let the people know that I was available for half-hour consultations. And, people can just come and talk to me for half an hour. And, so this young sister comes in. I don't remember anything about her, not her name, nothing. I remember she just sat there and she started talking for, I remember this correctly, for 24 minutes nonstop. Like I did not say a word for 24 minutes. And then at the end of it, she looked at me and she said, I feel better now. And she just walked out. And I did not say anything.
Yep.
And to this day, I believe this was like the best session I have had in my professional career. It was a session where I said nothing. And I like the way that you refer to it as it's an art of listening.
Mm-hmm.
And we can learn so much if we make the person feel safe, that they can just talk and they can just be nice. All right. So you said that that's the first thing that you do, connecting with the clients by listening to them, withholding any biases that you have, not making any assumptions. And again, we're hoping that you're not asked to be a therapist for our viewers out there, but these techniques are actually useful in all relationships. So it could be the marital relationship, the parental relationship, with co-workers, listening, friends, attentively, withholding biases, wait for the story to finish, do not jump to conclusion or making any assumptions. And usually, what does that lead into when there is that connection? Then what happens?
Well, I think when there is true connection, that's when trust start to build and vulnerability. And with that comes openness and comes flexibility. So when it's your turn to speak as a therapist and your turn to ask questions, those questions, even if they're difficult, they're able to go there. They're able to allow themselves to go to that hurt place or painful place or a place where they need to take responsibility or show more compassion to themselves. They have trusted because that connection has been built. And I think that's very important as the therapy, progresses with each client.
Okay. What do you say to people who say that, look, therapy is nice, but it's just too slow. I've been there for so many sessions and I don't see any improvement, nothing is happening. What do you say? What do you say to these people?
One of the things, it could be that the style of the therapist is not a match, and that could be very well the reason. Second, I wonder if they're allowing themselves to come fully to the therapy. That's why I said earlier, you need to fully come to it, not come, one foot in, one foot out. You really need to come and, roll up your sleeve and willing to talk and share and interact. I think these are the two things. Or maybe that person is expecting things to happen overnight. When you have a problem for 20 years, it's not going to be solved within 5 sessions. It's going to take time. It's a progression. And maybe that person is learning how to build a relationship, because that's how you build a relationship. You don't become best friends overnight. You become good friends with somebody. I'm not saying that you're going to be friend with the therapist, but that is the way you deal with your therapist is the way you really, it reflects a lot about the way you deal with relationship and building a relationship, and that takes time.
Yeah, so remember that as therapists, we do not aspire to become your friends, and if we are becoming your friends, that usually is a bad sign. But a therapist is friendly, though. And there is a difference between them attempting to become your friends and using friendly approach to build rapport and healthy, trustful relationship with you and them. We have a question here from one of our viewers. I think just going back to what we were talking about, what you should be looking for in a spouse. And they're suggesting that you should look for a spouse that loves to teach the kids Quran as a minimum, in addition to teaching them decency, politeness, honesty, and respect. I think in essence, what they're saying is that being able to see eye to eye with you, as far as if these are the things that you would want in your family, then they must somehow imbibe and be willing to do that. And do you do any premarital counseling, and do you believe that's important?
I think that is very important. And people, I think, need to come to it willing to realize maybe they're not a match. I think people need to come to it understanding that they're not coming to it so they'll be convinced of one another. They might really truly find that, we're not for each other. So sometimes they come to it a bit too late when they're in love or they have already bonded. I think it's very important to consider it as the first steps. I mean, not the early steps in knowing somebody, if that's the route or that's the commitment that both are going towards. I am working on that project, inshallah. I think it's very important.
Nice. Actually, I mean, alhamdulillah, I enjoy doing counseling, but, doing premarital counseling is actually my favorite. Mm-hmm. My job is always to talk the people out of it, but they rarely listen. So that is actually something that I truly.
You are terrible, Shaykh.
I know that is something that I try to do, but people don't listen to me. All right, beautiful. Okay, so Iman, we have got spouses listening to this. We've got parents listening to this. And usually, we want people to leave with some things like to do things like takeaways from this. Okay. Troubled marriages or people who are just not doing well. What do we tell them? in order to somehow, just make their relationships better? What are we talking about here?
I think every relationship goes through different stages. When you first meet, and then you get married, and then you have kids, and you spend time raising kids, and then when the kids leave, you're left where you started, right? I ask the parents to be, or the spouses to be as flexible as they can be with one another in order for them to go through all the different ways. I think if we get stuck in certain ways and certain mindset, and we get comfortable in that way, we will fall apart. We will drift apart. And some marriages, they end up staying together, but they're loveless and they're, emotionless, and they're just together. I think proper care is very important. I think taking responsibility is very important. I think as Muslim community, we need to practice what the Prophet ﷺ taught us in being easygoing and forgiving. Holding on to grudges, it will kill the marriages, will actually damage your liver, but that's a different story. Enhance who you are and change not change, but bring new flavor. Even when you see something is dying, if something is wilting, you get to revive something within you. Maybe it's spiritual practice. Maybe you need a break. Maybe you need a vacation. Maybe you guys need to go to therapy and maybe learn new skills, but really make it a priority. What I see is people get to a certain stage and like, oh, whatever. When you kind of give up and you don't care, that's when things start falling apart. So we need to put effort. We need to have proper care for one another, for us individually, and for the marriage itself.
Nice. I like the idea of, I think there was an imam that was asked, said that a young lady came to him and she said, Imam, our marriage is made in heaven. And the imam looked at her and he said, my daughter, he said, I don't know where marriages are made, but I know that maintenance takes place on earth. And I think that's the part that people miss out on. The idea of mutual maintenance being a shared responsibility rather than one-sided, he has to, she has to.
Yeah.
Sometimes we actually do miss out on these things, and our expectations exceed what we are willing to do in the relationship. And these are difficult. These are like really, really difficult conversations to have, or let's say this, these would be so helpful for us to actually face and be able and be willing to say, you know what, maybe on my part I also need to do something here. Reminds me of the story. It said that this guy bought a new house and he was really excited about the backyard, and he got this landscape engineer and he said, look, I want you to do my backyard, but he said, here's what I want you to get me like special kind of soil that would not allow any weeds to grow in. I want you to get me like a genetically modified grass that would not exceed a certain height. I want you to get me a sprinkler system that knows when to turn on and off, and if it's raining, it's not. And I want you to get me like special kind of flowers that would not creep under the sidewalk and crack it open. And I want you to get me, and the guy said, stop, he said. He said, if you want a garden, you have to be willing to do some gardening. And that's just a nice metaphor. If we want to have that happy family, I think we have to be willing to do some of that work and to be doing some of that gardening. So the expectations don't necessarily match the effort that is placed in them. All right, so Iman, last question, and time has gone by so unbelievably quick here. The idea of stigma regarding mental health. You said that's something that is changing, alhamdulillah, ya Rabbil Alameen. What do you see causes of that stigma, and what are we as clinicians doing in order to fight that stigma? On our show here, that's something that's really important: fight the stigma, educate the public, support the people who are going through mental health issues, and whenever we can, we support policies that would support the people and their loved ones who are going through mental health related issues.
I think anytime there's any type of limitations in any aspect of life, we go back to the first command of the Quran, Iqra. The more you know, the better you do. The more you have awareness and education about something, the more you're able to utilize that in your life. I think the lack of education and lack of awareness, it made it stigma. I think the way the society portrayed it, it's for crazy people. It's for people who wear, the robe backwards and they take them in the back of the. It's all of that we used to see in movies and cartoons and things like that. It stayed with people, but now our people are going towards, okay, you know what? Yeah, I do have depression. I do have anxiety. Yeah, I do have OCD. Yeah, I do that. And they're seeing now that their chronic pain is connected to their mental state. So they're listening differently. And I think from what I'm also seeing, that there are more medical professionals are coming on and having shows and talks and podcasts about take care, maybe you need to see a therapist, maybe this is from anxiety, maybe this, your heartburn, maybe because you have a reflex, because you're holding on to feelings. They're connecting the two, and it's beautiful because people get to look at things differently. So I think the stigma is still there. I'm not saying it's going to go away, but with education, with more mental health professionals talking about it, simplifying it, explaining what it is, I think people are coming around.
Beautiful. Iman, thank you for what you do.
You're welcome. Thank you for what you do.
No,
Barakallah feek.
Allah yahfazak ya Rabbi. This has been a great conversation.
Alhamdulillah.
And like we said, this is a taste of what happens when you go and see a counselor. This is what counseling is mostly about: connect, then support, help the people listen to their own thoughts, and offering support and guidance at that point. Therapy is not for crazy people. Yeah. Therapy is for people like myself and like yourself. Simply because by virtue of being humans, we are going to have some kind of a burden that we are unable to carry on our own. And we want support that is professional, that is confidential, that will just give us unconditional regard, that would not abuse us, that would not take advantage or exploit us, that would welcome us regardless of our limitations. And that is what therapists usually provide, and that's what we promise. On behalf of all of our viewers, Iman, once again, Jazakallah khair. People are very grateful here on their comments, very appreciative of what you said and how you said it. And we just want to say on their behalf, Jazakallah khair, and thank you very much. And to all of our viewers, thank you for spending this time of your evening, morning, I'm not sure where you are with us, but truly appreciate it. And inshallah, we will be here next week. And until we see you next week, we say so long and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.